Welcome to special Fox 32 News coverage of the Chicago 2023 mayoral and aldermanic election. I'm political editor Mike Flannery.
And I'm Natalie Bomke. The polls have just closed across the city, and we expect the first results to be posted any moment now. And we're here, of course, to bring them to you. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about what trends we might have been seeing kind of in the emerging hours, these final hours. And Mike, I'm going to talk to you about that. I didn't see any exit polls posted anywhere. So what kind of feel do you have?
Well, the turnout has been disappointing, unfortunately. We are waiting, hoping that the Associated Press, which will be populating those numbers here for mayor, we're expecting 244,000 votes to be posted by the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners shortly. The actual turnout at precinct polling places for in-person voting today, very disappointing. 50, 60, 70,000 fewer voters than election officials had been projecting. Of course, Natalie, we see 4, maybe 5 top-tier contenders. We'll wait and see what those numbers actually say once they're posted in the next few moments.
And then there's that question of the people who don't win, who don't move on to the runoff election. Will they make an endorsement tonight?
We are expecting that they will make, that some of them at least are preparing to make an endorsement, and we're hoping that's one of the reasons that we have even reporters and cameras even at headquarters for candidates who are not expected necessarily to finish in the top tier, but we'll be seeing if some of those endorsements are made tonight.
Okay, so again, we don't have any results just yet, but they should be coming in shortly, so make sure you stick with Fox 32. There's been a lot of speculation that this election could mean the end of Mayor Lightfoot's time at City Hall, but her campaign, though, is telling a much different story. Want to go live now to Anthony Ponce, who is covering her campaign tonight. Anthony?
Yeah, they've been echoing the message that the mayor is the only candidate that will be able to take on Paul Vallas, presuming that the mayor winds up in that top tier that Mike just mentioned. The top 2 finishers today go on to that runoff election, which is likely to occur. That election happening in April. The mood of anticipation in full effect here in River North at Carpenter's Hall, where the podium is set up. There's the teleprompter pieces of glass, so presumably there will be a speech made at some point tonight. We don't know if that means victory, means runoff, or it could mean a wait and see type situation with a lot of uncertainty as well surrounding when exactly we'll know the results of today's election. But this is not an easy one for Mayor Lightfoot based on poll numbers. She certainly has her work cut out for her with such a crowded field in this year's race. She had a very busy day on her last day on the campaign trail. She made 8 stops, including the traditional stop for lunch at Manny's Deli, where she actually ran into her opponent, one of her opponents there, Brandon Johnson. Now, the mayor, over the last 4 years, she again has had her work cut out for her, facing some unprecedented challenges when it came to not only the pandemic, but all the turmoil that followed the death of George Floyd the summer of 2020. Certainly a challenge. She's faced a lot of criticism for her handling of that, policing, public safety, education. So certainly there's optimism on the part of the campaign here at Carpenter's Hall. They are obviously predicting that their candidate will fall in the top 2. And we're just kind of in a wait-and-see mode here, Mike and Natalie. Please check back in as we get these results throughout the night.
Well, Anthony, as you know, of course, that Carpenters Union local is one of the building trades unions that has given hundreds of thousands of dollars to the mayor's re-election campaign. And they have faced some pushback from their members, but they've stuck with the mayor.
All right, thanks so much,
Anthony.
Thanks
very much. Now, voter opinion surveys, of course, have been all over the place regarding where the mayor might finish, from second to third or even fourth. But the front runner in these surveys has been Paul Vallas. He told me last night that he's ready to move forward and focus on the runoff. He's raised millions of dollars for that. Dane Placco is at Vallas headquarters right now.
Hey guys, yeah, doors opened here about a half hour ago, and already a pretty good crowd filling the event space. In fact, you might say that Paul Vallas has already taken over City Hall even before the first vote was counted, and that's because the name of this venue is City Hall. It's a restaurant and a catering business that is filling up fast. We're told that Vallas himself and his family are staying about a couple blocks away from here in a hotel as the results come in. He did make a couple of appearances, public appearances earlier today. One of those we can show you right now is when he went voting at the Healy Elementary School, which is near his home in Bridgeport. Afterwards, he said he feels very confident about surviving this runoff because he's put so much of the emphasis in his campaign on public safety, which poll after poll shows is the #1 issue with Chicago voters this election. Now, speaking of polls, Vallas has been the front runner in the last few that have been conducted over the past month. And I talked to one of his top campaign aides earlier. They say they feel very good about tonight, and that's because early voting is showing strong turnout on the southwest and northwest sides of the city of Chicago. Also, they're seeing a lot of people, actual folks going to the polls in those particular areas. That's part of the bungalow belt of Chicago, of course, and they say the reason that's important is because that's a part of the city that plays to Vallas's strength, his anti-crime message. Now, it's interesting to note that Vallas has run in several city and statewide elections. He has never won an election, however. If he wins tonight, this would be a first, at least a primary. In fact, he came very close to beating Rod Blagojevich back in 2002 in the Democratic gubernatorial primary. They were only about 8,000 votes apart. He last ran in the Chicago mayoral primary, this very same campaign, the same election 4 years ago in 2019. Back then, he finished in 9th place with only 5% of the vote, way behind where he's expected to finish tonight. So why the big turnaround? And talking to some of his aides and strategists here tonight, they say a big part of it is money. He's got a lot more money this time. He spent over $5 million on this particular campaign, more than Mayor Lightfoot has herself, little less than Willie Wilson. They also believe that his public safety message plays a lot more strongly this election cycle than it did 4 years ago. And part of it is also just racial politics. He is the only white male in this election this time, when last time he had to split that vote with 3 or 4 other strong white male candidates. So the situation here, we are in the Fulton Market, Vallas headquarters, filling up. We're told the candidate a couple blocks away, and if they see good numbers coming in early, they tell us that they may make some sort of announcement here around 9 o'clock tonight. Send it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dane. Boy, an all-encompassing report there by Dane. Lots of background information. And we've talked a lot about the early mail-in ballots in this election. And Mike, you're hearing that the in-person voting is certainly a different story.
Well, there was a big surge in vote by mail. This is the first mayoral election since the pandemic. And the pandemic introduced people to a lot of things, all those things you can purchase online, buying groceries online. People learned how to do that. It's clear that a lot of Chicagoans have learned how to vote by mail, and they are doing that. The Board of Election Commissioners had an optimistic projection that they had offered earlier. Let's listen.
It's suggesting that voters had made up their mind earlier in this process, that they had picked a candidate, that they got comfortable with early voting and voting by mail, especially voting by mail, and they just got it done out of the way a bit earlier rather than waiting for Election Day.
So what's happening here is that they are, you've seen people voting by mail. 4 years ago, about 555,000 total, Natalie, cast ballots, or about 36% of total registered voters. Election officials say they still hope for a late after-work surge. They were hoping for that, with the polls scheduled to close about 10 minutes ago at 7 p.m., but we didn't really see many signs, if any, of that, Natalie. If we do have we're still waiting for those results. Yes. As you can see, an election official, that guy Max Bever, told me that at 7:01 they were going to flip a switch and then post 244,000 early votes and mail-in votes that had come in. So far, we don't have any votes posted. We're hoping to see that in the next few moments, though.
Yeah, and kind of disappointing, I would say, for residents of Chicago, because you only have about 28.1% of people voting thus
as of
far.
5 p.m.
As of 5 p.m. And what was it, the last mayoral election, do you recall?
It was about 36%, 555,000 ballots cast. That is out of about 1.5 million registered voters. The board thought instead of the mid-30s, which is, it looks like we might be lucky to end up there, we might in fact get over 600,000. Maybe we'd get somewhere in the 40s in terms of turnout. But that right now at least may not be in the cards. A lot of mail-in ballots that haven't yet arrived are going to be counted beginning tomorrow. There's still 100,000, Natalie, of vote-by-mail ballots that are out there. The Board of Election Commissioners guesses that 60,000 to 80,000 of those mail-in ballots will eventually come in. As long as they're postmarked by today and they arrive by March 14th, then they will be counted.
Right. So we may not get runoff results tonight. We may not get the top tier results tonight. We might have to wait because of those mail-in ballots. From the turnout that you saw today, Mike, does that lean toward any particular candidate? Well,
I mean, the earlier turnout was, in the early voting, we saw, as Dane Placco said, the 19th ward in the Beverly, Mount Greenwood, Morgan Park neighborhoods. That 19th ward had more early voters and vote-by-mail ballots cast than the 7 lowest voting wards all put together. I mean, that's a lot of political clout. The 41st ward, a similar story. The 2nd ward on the near north side and parts of the Gold Coast. The 43rd ward, the 47th ward. Those are all places where Paul Vallas thinks he's going to do well. In fact, other campaigns think Paul Vallas is going to do well there. But now that we get all these numbers coming in tonight, will that in fact be the case? We'll see. Clearly, in some of those neighborhoods, younger voters in particular, the Brandon Johnson campaign thinks they're going to get younger white voters supporting him. And many of them live in those wards as well. So we are eager to see what those initial numbers look like.
Okay, so let's also talk about, because I think there's some confusion among people out there. What is the threshold of seeing a runoff election? Because a lot of people are hearing this 50% plus one. What is plus one? Explain that.
Okay, so that means a majority. So not just half, but that one extra vote means you've got a majority. And if somebody could get 50% plus one or 50% plus 1,000 votes, he or she is instantly elected mayor of Chicago. There won't be an April 4th runoff. There won't be any more of this who struck John. We have a new mayor. And that's the way it worked during Richard M. Daley's campaigns after 1999. State law changed in 1999. We had party primaries, Republican and Democratic primaries prior to 1999. After that, we've had a nonpartisan, if you can believe it, we've had a nominally nonpartisan election, and we have had, we've had several runoffs. In 2015, Chuy Garcia forced Rahm into a runoff, and then in 2019, Tony Preckwinkle and Lori Lightfoot faced off.
Okay, so we've seen a lot of polls. I mean, and you did an entire segment, I remember, the last week on all the polls that have been done. In your
the one thing they agree on is that Vallas is the front runner.
Yes.
After that, they don't agree.
Okay, so what is the likelihood in your experience, based on past elections, that those polls are actually accurate?
You know what? One of them is going to prove to be remarkably accurate. We've had so many, and the authors of that poll that emerges out of the dust and out of the competition of these polls, I believe that one of them is going to get pretty close to having been on the money. And that pollster, that political consultancy, is going to have a lot of bragging rights for months or years to come.
All right, so we're continuing to watch the results roll in. We don't have any hard, tangible numbers for you just yet. But remember, we have wall-to-wall live coverage for you, and we expect to hear from some of the candidates early on tonight at 9 on air and online at Fox 32.
You bet. Thank you for joining us here online. A reminder, we will be back straight up at 8 p.m.
We'll see you then.